Let's move on. The attack on the security forces in Sukma district in Chhattisgarh was meticulously planned. Sources have told Headlines today that the entire area of the ambush was filled with landmines and IEDs, but with specific warnings about the presence of Maoists in the area. The question now is, how did the Naxals manage to lay the mines in that area that was so close to the national highway?
Even as probe into the Naxal ambush in Chhattisgarh's Sukma district continues, shocking facts have emerged that go on to suggest that the attack was carefully and meticulously planned. Sources have told Headlines today that the Maoists not just managed to score over the security forces, but they had heavily mined the entire area. Headlines today has learned that the IEDs were planted well in advance by the Naxals. This punches holes into the security agency's claims that the warnings were issued about the presence of two large armed groups of Maoists in the area. Because if there indeed was a warning, how did the Red terrorists manage to lay mines in the area along the national highway? Why was the presence of IEDs detected only after the deadly attack that claimed 16 lives? With Jugal Purohit in Sukma, Bureau Report, Headlines Today.
Joining us now from Jagdalpur is our correspondent Jugal Purohit. Jugal, what have you found about the glaring security lapses that were the reason perhaps for the attack and the ambush that day on security forces?
Well, as soon as this entire ambush was reported, we saw that the people at the top especially came out with dates, with details, with names, saying that on these very dates, that's March 5th, 7th, 9th and 10th, is when we had alerted about the presence of very senior Maoist cadres from Odisha as well as from the local areas, and the troops were warned in that sense, but unfortunately they did not perhaps heed the warnings well enough. Now what we are reporting is essentially that what that side is only half truth. It's not the entire story, because yesterday when we were at the site, we realized that the security forces were still discovering IEDs which were still there, dug inside deep. What we understood was that the IEDs were not planted on that day of the ambush. They were planted well in advance. Now the reason why we still say that this is an intelligence failure is because these IEDs were not planted somewhere deep inside jungles. These IEDs were planted right next to the national highway, which is, mind you, a busy national highway, which is in relatively better state than most of the other roads, and it connects a lot of areas between Andhra Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, so that's why it's being used quite heavily. Now what kind of an intelligence input is this if you do not know about Maoists being present there, planting IEDs for days in advance, choosing a certain spot along a busy national highway, and then only once the ambush is done is when you realize that they had actually planted these IEDs days in advance, and in a sense one can say that he had even rehearsed and zeroed down upon this plot. So there was a lot more depth that these intelligence inputs should have got actually for those troops to be better warned and better armed, but that unfortunately was not the case. And if that be so, then we definitely cannot claim that the intelligence was passed on to those who are not around now anymore to defend their actions. The fact is still that intelligence inputs were still generic. They were not as specific as they should have been, and the shocking part is that all of this took place in an open field next to a highway and nobody came to know about it. But and I can tell you that an activity of this sort where IEDs are being planted has to be done days in advance. It cannot simply be done in a matter of minutes. So this is the reason why we still say that this is a massive intelligence failure for which these 16 people paid the price with their lives.
Absolutely shocking how no one even noticed how IEDs were planted so close to the national highway. Jugal Purohit there reporting from Jagdalpur.